Growing up in a small, tight-knit village, I was always overshadowed by my older brother, Lucas, the golden boy of the family. He was perfect, athletic, successful, and adored by everyone. But behind the smile and charm, there was a storm brewing. Lucas decided to hire a private investigator to uncover my secrets, believing I was still the failure I was when we were kids. What he didn't know was that I wasn't the same person anymore. Instead of exposing my failures, the investigator revealed something shocking: my multi-million-dollar success. My family has always viewed me as the disappointment. My father, a stoic, hard-working man, never quite understood me, while my mother adhered strictly to traditional values, often belittling me for not living up to her expectations. In contrast, my older brother was a perfect son. He married young, had children, and seemed to live a life of luxury, all while making me feel insignificant. Lucas's lifestyle was a constant reminder of my perceived failures. His fancy cars, powerboats, and a seemingly perfect family painted a picture of what I should have been. I could never escape the suffocating pressure. Every Sunday dinner felt like a reminder of how far behind I was. While he boasted about his achievements, I remained silent, afraid of drawing attention to my own success, fearing that no one would understand it. I was a sensitive child, constantly battling depression, asthma, and feelings of inadequacy. My parents never saw my struggles, only the fact that I didn't excel in sports or academics. The comparisons between Lucas and me were constant. I grew up feeling invisible and overlooked, and it didn't help that school was a battleground where I was never the strong one. After high school, I enrolled in college, but the weight of my family's expectations became too much. I dropped out after my second year, and that choice sparked a family controversy. The decision was met with disappointment and judgment. My younger sister, the princess of the family, barely acknowledged my struggles, often treated me the same way as the rest of the family did. I found solace in a small comic book and video game store, where I met a like-minded friend with big ambitions. Together, we co-founded a successful IT support business. This partnership was a turning point for me, and it wasn't long before we sold the business to a larger corporation. The buyout left me with cash and stock options that would change my life forever. With my newfound wealth, I didn't splurge on lavish items. I lived humbly, working as a CTO for a private startup. Despite my financial success, my family remained oblivious to my accomplishments. They still thought I worked at the comic book store, and I couldn't bring myself to correct them. The gap between my life and theirs only grew wider. Every Sunday, I was expected to attend family dinners, where I was bombarded with unsolicited advice on marriage, family, and what I should do with my life. My brother would dominate the conversation, and my parents, though loving, never seemed to truly understand or appreciate my career. I often found myself questioning why I still went to these dinners. It wasn't until a therapy session that I realized why I was still holding on to the past. I wanted my family's approval, but they weren't capable of giving it to me. My therapist helped me understand that my value was not defined by their perception of me. I needed to create boundaries and stop seeking validation from people who couldn't provide it. Lucas, ever the perfectionist, hired a private investigator to dig into my life. He believed I was still a failure and wanted to expose me. However, the investigator uncovered something far more shocking: my success. I had more than $1 million in assets and a thriving career. This discovery threw my family into chaos. But instead of celebrating my achievements, Lucas became jealous and resentful. The investigator's findings weren't limited to just my career. They also exposed personal details about my life, including my wealth, my humble lifestyle, and even my struggles with depression. I felt violated, but the shock wasn't over. I traced the leak back to Lucas and realized that he had been spying on me for months. Confronting Lucas was inevitable. I could no longer let him treat me like a project or try to destroy me. The confrontation was intense, and Lucas, unable to accept the truth, tried to deny everything. But the evidence was clear. He had crossed a line, and I was done being the family's punching bag. My parents' reaction to the news was unexpected. Instead of siding with Lucas, they turned to me with an odd sense of admiration. They saw me in a new light, finally recognizing my success and achievements. But it didn't feel like the validation I had hoped for. It felt forced, like they were trying to make up for years of neglect. Lucas, desperate to regain control of the situation, began to boast about his car dealership sales and his supposed promotion. But I wasn't interested in his attempts to save face. I calmly brought up his financial troubles and the fact that he was living far beyond his means. The silence in the room was deafening, and I could feel the tension rise. The family dinner that followed was nothing like the ones we had before. What should have been a simple gathering turned into an emotional battleground. Old wounds were reopened, and the issues that had been simmering for years finally exploded. I could see the cracks in my family's facade, and for the first time, I realized that we would never be the same. The aftermath of the dinner was chaotic. My parents, uncomfortable with the new dynamics, began to argue with one another. Lucas, feeling humiliated, tried to restore his position, but it was clear that things had shifted. I had exposed the truth, and my family was no longer the same. The tension from that evening seeped into every aspect of my life, including my relationship with my wife. Daisy and I had been struggling for years, but this family drama made things even worse. The divorce was inevitable. Daisy's infidelity and our inability to communicate only deepened the divide. Our children, Peach and Mario, were caught in the middle, and I hated seeing them so confused. Daisy's behavior during the divorce was shocking. She tried to turn the kids against me, manipulating them into thinking I didn't love them. The lies she told were painful, and it hurt to see my children questioning my love for them. But I wasn't going to let her win. I had to stay strong for them, even if it meant making difficult decisions. Peach and Mario were suffering. Daisy's attempt to alienate them from me were taking a toll. They didn't understand why their mother was acting this way, and they struggled with their emotions. I knew I had to step in and do everything I could protect them from Daisy's influence. I sought legal counsel to help navigate the complexities of the divorce. The lawyer confirmed that Daisy's actions were a form of parental alienation, and we had grounds to fight for custody. The legal battle ahead would be long and difficult, but I was determined to protect my children from the emotional damage Daisy was causing. The divorce proceedings dragged on, and the tension between Daisy and me escalated. She continued to badmouth me to the kids, making them question everything. I felt helpless at times, but I knew I had to keep fighting. I couldn't let Daisy tear our family apart, even if it meant taking drastic measures. As the battle intensified, I found an unexpected ally in Ava, a woman I met at a technology conference. Her insights into cybersecurity helped me navigate the legal and digital hurdles in my case. But it was her support and understanding that truly made a difference. Ava became my anchor, and we began to talk about a future together. Introducing Ava to my family was a delicate process. I wasn't sure how they would react, especially with everything that had happened. But Ava was calm, collected, and understanding. She didn't try to force herself into my family's chaos. Instead, she gave me the space I needed to make my own decisions. Ava and my sister's middle child, who resembled me, instantly bonded. It was refreshing to see Peach and Mario respond positively to Ava. Over time, we began to establish a routine, with short and casual family gatherings. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step in the right direction. With time, my family began to adjust to the new dynamics. They understood that I wasn't going to let them control my life anymore. The boundaries I had set were respected, and I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. As my relationship with Ava grew stronger, I started to envision a future where I could build a new family foundation. One based on respect, love, and mutual support, not obligation or guilt. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time, I felt optimistic about the future. One evening, just as things were starting to feel normal again, my phone buzzed with an unexpected message. It was from my father. For the first time in years, he wanted to talk. I hadn't heard from him directly since our explosive family dinner, and the message, "I think we need to talk," filled me with anxiety. Was this just another ploy, or did he truly want to make amends? I met my father at a quiet diner halfway between his house and mine. When I arrived, his face was unreadable, as always. He didn't say much at first, just stared at me with a look that seemed to mix guilt and pride. It wasn't until the third refill of coffee that he finally spoke. "I know I failed you, son. I didn't protect you. But I've been thinking a lot lately about how things have turned out. My father's words were a mixture of regret and shame, and it left me with a deep sense of confusion. Could I forgive him? Could I even trust him? Our conversation soon shifted to Lucas. My father admitted, after much prodding, that he had always seen me as a second son, the one who could never quite measure up. The admission was painful, but also revealed a long-standing resentment that had festered between us all. My father confessed that he had never pushed Lucas to grow up, and that had allowed him to become reckless. This new truth about my father's guilt added complexity to my already fractured relationship with him. Could this be the beginning of something different, or was it too late? That night, as I returned home, I felt a deep sense of exhaustion. I didn't know what to think about my father's confession, but as I sat down at my desk, my phone rang again. It was a number I didn't recognize. A woman's voice came through the line, saying she was from the IRS. My stomach dropped. She revealed that there were some discrepancies in Lucas's tax filings that had been flagged for investigation. She didn't know the specifics, but she mentioned that it involved multiple properties and large amounts of debt. Was this why Lucas had been so desperate to control the narrative? I knew I had to act. I contacted my lawyer immediately and had him look into the matter. In the meantime, I began gathering information on Lucas's financial situation. What I uncovered shocked me. Lucas wasn't just struggling with debt. He was buried under it. Multiple unpaid loans, a second mortgage on his house, and a secret car dealership contract with hidden stipulations. Everything about his life was a facade. The reality of his financial collapse was much darker than I could have imagined. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with this information, but I knew it had to come to light sooner or later. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything in my life had been one long lie. I turned to my private investigator, asking for even more details on Lucas's financial dealings. What came back was devastating. The investigator found more than just tax fraud. There were allegations of money laundering and shady business deals that connected Lucas to several criminal activities. The reality of my brother's life was starting to unravel, and I was no longer sure who the real villain was. Could he have been hiding this from everyone, or had my parents known all along? I knew I had to confront Lucas, but this time, things would be different. He wouldn't be able to twist the narrative or make excuses. I invited him to a quiet park, hoping for a civil conversation. When he arrived, he immediately went on the defensive. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're wrong," he said. But as I laid out the evidence, his arrogance faded. Lucas became visibly shaken, his facade crumbling as I detailed every financial misstep and the legal consequences that were sure to come. The silence between us spoke volumes. This was the moment of reckoning. Later that evening, I shared the news with my parents. They were shocked, but the surprise was followed by denial. "He's our son," my mother muttered. "He couldn't be involved in anything like that." But my father, to my astonishment, seemed more accepting of the truth. He turned to me and said, "You're right. We should have known." His words were different this time, not full of pride, but rather sorrow. Maybe he was finally seeing the extent of the damage caused by his indifference. But for my mother, it was too much to bear. The fallout from Lucas's unraveling was catastrophic. The family split even further, with my mother unable to cope with the shame of Lucas's actions. She distanced herself from both me and him, retreating into a shell of silence. My father, on the other hand, began to take a more active role in the family dynamics, though it was clear that the damage had already been done. I watched as my mother and father barely spoke to each other, their marriage cracking under the weight of years of silence and resentment. Amidst the chaos, I made a decision. I could no longer allow myself to be weighed down by this toxic family dynamic. I told my parents I needed space. I didn't want to cut them off completely, but I needed to focus on my own life. I wasn't going to let my past continue to define me. I began exploring new opportunities, looking to invest in ways that align with my values. But deep down, I knew I had prepared myself for what might come next. There was still so much left unresolved. As my relationship with Ava blossomed, I began to understand the importance of building trust from the ground up. She encouraged me to be open and transparent about my past and the family secrets I had uncovered. I was hesitant at first, afraid of scaring her away. But Ava showed me that true love could only exist when both parties were willing to be vulnerable. Slowly, I began to rebuild the trust one had lost, not only with her but with myself. While I worked on my personal life, my children, Peach and Mario, continued to struggle with the aftermath of the divorce. Daisy's attempts to alienate them from me were starting to take their toll. They were distant, confused, and heartbroken. It was up to me to bridge the gap and show them that I loved them, no matter what. But the damage caused by Daisy's manipulation was deep, and I knew I had a long road ahead. As the legal battles with Daisy intensified, I fought for custody of my children. I was determined to protect them from the toxic environment Daisy was creating. But Daisy, knowing she had the upper hand, continued to manipulate the situation. It was a bitter fight, and I felt like I was losing ground. But I wasn't going to give up, not this time. I was going to fight for my kids, no matter the cost. After months of legal wrangling, the breakthrough finally came. Daisy's manipulation tactics were exposed, and the court sided with me in the custody battle. I was granted primary custody of Peach and Mario. It was a victory, but it didn't feel as sweet as I had imagined. The damage to our family dynamic was irreversible, but at least I could ensure that my children were safe and loved. With the custody battle behind me, I knew it was time to make a fresh start. Ava and I discussed relocating, starting a new chapter in a new city. It was a daunting prospect, but I knew it was the right decision. We packed our things, said goodbye to the remnants of our past, and headed toward the unknown, ready to build a new life together. The first few months in our new city were filled with challenges. We had to adapt to new routines, make new friends, and find our place in the world. But with Ava by my side, it felt like the weight of the past was lifting. We were creating something new, something based on mutual respect and love. Just when I thought I had left the past behind, my family resurfaced. My parents, now more humble and contrite, reached out to me, asking if we could start over. They wanted to meet Ava, to see the life I had built for myself. The invitation felt surreal, but I agreed. It was time to face the past, once and for all. The meeting with my parents was tense. There were apologies, tears, and long silences. My father finally admitted that they had failed me as parents, but it was clear that the years of emotional neglect could never be erased. Ava was gracious, and my parents, though reluctant, seemed to accept her. But the truth was, nothing would ever be the same again. Ava and I continued to navigate our new life together, strengthening our bond and building a solid foundation for future. But my relationship with my family remained strained. We had made progress, but the scars of the past would always be there. I realized that true healing came from within, and I needed to focus on my own happiness and peace of mind. As the months passed, I began to slowly detach from my family's dysfunction. I didn't sever ties completely, but I set firm boundaries. I couldn't allow their toxic behaviors to dictate my future. I had come too far to let them pull me back into the chaos. With Ava, Peach, and Mario by my side, I finally felt a sense of peace. We had our struggles, but together we could face anything. As we moved forward, I knew there would still be challenges. But for the first time, I believed in the possibility of a brighter future. I began to focus on building a legacy that was mine and mine alone. No longer would I live in the shadows of my brother or my parents' expectations. I was carving my own path, one that was defined by my values, my work, and the love I shared with those who truly mattered. As I stood on the brink of this new chapter, I realized that everything I had been through had shaped me into the person I was today. The betrayal, the struggles, and the sacrifices all played a part in making me stronger. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. With Ava by my side, my children in my care, and my past behind me, I felt ready for whatever the future held. The road ahead would be uncertain, but I knew I could face it with the strength I had built along the way. The family I had always longed for wasn't one I could find in the past. It was the one I was building now.